Hi, bear with me. I just had to um, verify my YouTube account before we got started. So I'm just getting set up again here. All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming in again tonight. This it means a lot to me that you are showing up and interested in hearing what I have to share. For those of you who don't know me, am Carrie Scott. I am the founder of the Soul Selves framework. And tonight, this is the Soul Selves Sessions 3 of 4. Uh, we've looked at the soul selves in relation to awareness in September. And then last month in October, we looked at the soul selves in relation to the nervous system. And tonight, we are going to focus on the soul selves in terms of satisfaction. So, what are the soul cells? It's a framework that I have been gifted, that I've come up with, um, sort of downloaded to me through my own personal awakening experience, as well as through researching other people's awakening experiences. And there's essentially 5 soul self phases that are illuminating the path between the ego and the soul. And so each phase, each soul self has these distinctive sort of characteristics, these markers that we can learn about and then help understand and implement in terms of our own spiritual journey. So they're sort of guiding us along the awakening path. And we're always sort of moving in and out and between any one of these paths, any one of these soul selves at any given time. We may be really stuck in one for a long length of time, or we may move from one to another within a matter of seconds, and then back and forth, and it's kind of all over the place, which is the beauty of it. But you may remember, if you've been listening before, there's this analogy that I really like to share in terms of the light of, like, white light shining through a prism, and it illuminates what emerges on the other side is this spectrum of color, right? So we've got this whole rainbow of colored light that emerges when we shine white light through a prism. And so similarly with the soul cells, when we shine that light of consciousness through our bodies, metaphorically speaking, there emerges this whole spectrum of what I call the soul cells on the other side. So we've got this whole spectrum emerging, and it's all, again, part of that same light of consciousness. So no place or no phase is any better than any other, because they're all equal, they're all divine. They just look different as they emerge into our experience and into our reality. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper again into those to be able to identify them as we come across them in our own sort of day-to-day living, right? Last month, we talked about it in relation to the nervous system, and I taught you a little check-in to find out if you were in the sympathetic nervous system or the parasympathetic nervous system at any given moment. And so I just want to revisit that real quick and just see where you're at and where I'm at. And if you recall, we're just going to plug one nostril, and you can do it with me if you like. And take a deep breath through the other side. And then plug the other nostril. And take a deep breath through the other nostril again. And you may have to do it a few times to be able to just check and see. And for me, right now, my left nostril is the easiest to breathe through, which means that I'm in my parasympathetic nervous system, or like feed and breed or rest and digest. And if your right nostril is the easiest to breathe through, that means you're in the sympathetic nervous system. So maybe in a more heightened state, fight or flight, and ready to do some sort of high energy activities. But it's good that I'm in my parasympathetic nervous system right now, because that means I'm more relaxed, more open to receiving, and hopefully I'll be able to channel as much of this information that I want to share with you tonight as I can. So I have been offering an analogy each session to help share this information in a way that might explain it a little bit differently, to kind of give you the various tools to be able to visualize it and integrate it a little bit better. The first was the prism, which I spoke about earlier. Last month, I talked about the cycles of the moon and sort of phases of illumination and how that sort of relates to each soul self. And tonight, I'm going to share with you a new analogy that I just learned about this past month. And I'm actually going to just really kind of fine tune this analogy to two of the soul selves. So we're going to look specifically at the thinking self and the observer self. But before I do that, I'm just going to run through each of the soul selves as kind of a quick review so that we understand what they are in essence. And so we have the bodily self, which is the first one. And the bodily self is when we're most rooted in our ego. This is where we are collecting all of the things that we identify with that make us the person that we are, that we believe to be. This is where we form our beliefs. This is where we form our thoughts. It's also where we collect and are conditioned by society, by our parents, by the world around us. And more often than not, our nervous systems end up in this place of sympathetic overdrive. So we're often in fight or flight, but we really don't have a lot of self-awareness when we're in the bodily self. So it can be a difficult place to be because we're often very unhappy and always seeking something or trying to distract ourselves from the things that we're feeling and experiencing a lot of trauma. So that's the bodily self. The vital self is when we have that first glimpse of our soul or something that is sort of beyond ourselves, whether or not we understand what it is or call it a spiritual experience. It is just that moment when all of that distraction that we have constantly in the bodily self sort of stills for a moment and allows this light of our consciousness to sort of break through all those layers of ego and gift us with a different experience, a different perspective. So it's a real sort of like life-changing moment that may happen very briefly, or it could be a prolonged sort of vital self moment experience that leaves us feeling quite blissful or profoundly happy. Then if we choose to get curious about this experience, we move into the thinking self. And this is where we now are trying to understand what it was that happened, what shifted our perspective, how can we find it again, where can we get more of it. And we tend to shift our awareness now to the thoughts that we're having and the feelings and the emotions that we're experiencing. Our awareness is developing, it's growing and expanding, often being turned internally. So what might start as personal growth can then lead to spiritual growth, and then to spiritual expansion, and so on from there. All of this goes on in the thinking self. This is where we really do that deep work of uncovering all of the parts of our ego that have been hidden to us. This is also referred to as shadow work. And in tonight's session, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about the thinking self and what I call 3 energy modality categories. And um, yeah, so we're gonna do a deeper dive into what that looks like in the thinking self. Um, and then the fourth soul self is the observer self, which now is another huge shift in perspective where we're stepping back from all of that work that we're doing in the thinking self, and we're becoming the non-judgmental witness or observer of our own thoughts, of our own experience, of our emotions, of the external. And it's just a place of calm and ease and grace and presence that exists. Then the fifth of the 5 soul selves is the transcendent self. And this is where we're now completely immersed in our soul. We're completely absolved of our ego and really connected with everything and everyone and having this truly blissful experience beyond our mind. And this is where it gets a bit complicated because there's lots of different descriptions about this transcendent self experience, but because it's an experience that is beyond the mind, that we're now fully immersed in consciousness, any words that we're using to describe it are actually moving us back into an observer self or another bodily self or another soul self as part of the duality, because the words themselves are coming from a place that is within the mind, and the experience that we can't really understand until we have the experience or experience the experience is one that's coming from consciousness. So there's also phases beyond the transcendent self that I've come across in a lot of the research that I've been doing. And there are quite a few other frameworks that are similar to my soul selves framework that talk about these phases beyond the transcendent self. And if anybody's interested in learning more about these other frameworks that I've encountered and researched in my research, I should say, just reach out to me and let me know, because it is quite fascinating. And there's quite a collection of them that are all very similar. Everybody's got, of course, a different name for their phases, and some of them may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 plus sort of phases. Mine focus on just the 5 primarily, but there is actually quite a lot of research and a lot of people looking at this phases of awakening or phases of the spiritual journey, or there's so many different ways of saying levels of consciousness is another one. But yeah, there's a ton of them out there. So going back to my analogy for tonight, we're looking primarily at the thinking self and the observer self. So it goes like this. And just, get comfortable in your chair because we're going to go for a little ride here. Imagine that you are an astronaut and you are in your rocket getting ready to launch into orbit. Maybe we're just orbiting the Earth, or maybe we're going to the moon, or maybe we're even going to Mars. But the first part of this journey, we're in our rocket. We got to get buckled up, putting on our harness and getting all strapped in, because somehow we figured out how to create enough velocity and enough acceleration to be able to escape all of the gravity that is holding us to the Earth. And in order to do that, we have to strap ourselves to this rocket and launch ourselves into space. And so as we're taking off, there is this immense amount of pressure, all of these forces are acting on our body. We can feel the intensity of all these forces pushing and pulling in various directions. And there's these G forces acting on us in the rocket ship. And, we're going for this incredibly intense ride. All of this happening in what I would consider the thinking self. We're putting all of this effort in. There's so much work that the rocket has to do in order to move us out of this gravity that's pulling us down into and above the Earth's atmosphere. And it's a rough ride. It's a really rough ride. We're absolutely thrilled that we're going, and we're terrified at the same time. And the amount of emotions and forces and everything that's acting on us all at the same time is really intense. And sometimes we're not even sure if we're gonna survive, because it's just that much of a crazy ride. And then all of a sudden we break through that atmosphere, we get free of the gravity, and we enter this sort of calm silence. And now we've reached the orbit, and we're moving now what I would call into the observer self, because everything, it gets quiet. We can unbuckle, take our harness off, and lift into this zero gravity place where there's sort of just this ease and this calm that takes over. Our whole perspective shifts. We can look out the window of our rocket and see the Earth as the marble that it is in this vast amount of space. And our whole world changes in that instant, because now we're seeing something in a way that we have never seen it before, and we'll never be able to not understand our relationship as a person coming from the Earth and living in this vast universe. And we're just in awe and amazement of this experience that we're having. So that's the analogy that I want to share for tonight, in terms of the thinking self and the amount of effort that we're putting in, and then the huge amount of ease and relief and perspective, this huge shift in perspective that we have when we move into the observer self. Now, I'm going to go back to the bodily self and introduce this concept for the theme tonight of satisfaction. And I think we all have a pretty good handle on what it means, or what it feels like to experience satisfaction. And I mean, it's a good time to probably talk about this, because with the holidays coming up, there is a lot of desires that are surfacing. I know there are for me, in terms of the gifts that I want to give, the shopping that I want to do, sort of the atmosphere that I want to create for my family around Christmas. And I think a lot of those desires, particularly around the holidays, can start to cause a lot of stress and confusion, and it leaves us questioning a little bit, or often, why it is that we're participating in this fulfillment of these desires. And this is sort of societal expectations that the holidays can bring to us, right? We get a little bit lost into what the message is often, but this is what it is about living in the bodily self, is that we get into what I call a cycle of fulfillment. And so we have a desire. For me, often, simply put, like after dinner, I always want chocolate. I want a bite of chocolate. That is my desire. It comes like clockwork every day. And so I'll go to the pantry, into my stash of chocolate and get some chocolate. And I have my bite. And, immediately there's that immediate gratification, that satisfaction that I am fulfilling by having that piece of chocolate. And sometimes, um, that desire returns immediately and I want another piece. Or sometimes I can, wait until the next day until that desire returns and have another piece of chocolate. But inevitably, I- I'll eat that chocolate and be satisfied, but it's only temporary. And so this is the really important part to notice about the cycle of fulfillment, is that any desire that we have, and when we fulfill it, we are only fulfilling that temporarily, because there's always going to be another desire coming in to take its place. Whether that is chocolate, whether that is a new pair of shoes, whether that is a new item of clothing, whether that desire is, um, a new car, whether it's more money, whether it's another house, whether it is, um, you know, a, a, a degree that we add to our name. All of these layers of our ego, as I call them, are these desires that we are trying to fulfill inevitably. And when we reach that desire, when we reach that goal and fulfill it, we find satisfaction, and then that satisfaction inevitably becomes dissatisfaction, because we want the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And this just continues to go on and on and on. And we're in this cycle of fulfillment. And, marketers are really good at taking advantage of this sort of infinite amount of desires that we have by, planting seeds into our brains that we will be happy when we have this, or we'll be happy when we have the next thing. But we never get to that place of just being happy and fulfilled by participating in this external cycle of fulfillment. Now, we move into the vital self when we kind of shine a light on this cycle of fulfillment and realize, hold on a second, everything that I'm doing, all this work, to try and fill that next desire and next desire, isn't making me happy. Like, I'm not feeling satisfied all of the time. All of these promises that the marketers are making isn't coming back to me and bringing satisfaction. Another way of looking at it in relation to the vital self is, in this vital self moment, we're having this profound experience, maybe this profound sense of satisfaction that feels so different than just the satisfaction we're getting from that piece of chocolate, or from that new car, or whatever that external desire that we fulfilled was. All of a sudden, we're feeling this immense blissfulness or joyfulness from something that seems external, but we can't quite put our finger on what that is, right? Like, this beautiful sensation. We're having this profound experience, this profound spiritual experience, and we want more of that. And the mistake that we often make in the vital self is that we think that profound blissfulness, that profound satisfaction that we're feeling, is coming again from something external. Whereas really what we're going to learn along this spiritual journey is that satisfaction is actually within us, and it's always accessible to us. We just have to learn how to recognize it and tap into it and allow ourselves to feel that internal satisfaction, stepping out of the cycle of fulfillment where everything that we desire is external, and recognize that we are capable of summoning satisfaction from within us at any given time. So now we're moving into the thinking self. And this is where we start to interact with our satisfaction in different ways. So we're bringing our awareness to our thoughts, and we're connecting those thoughts to our emotions, and we're recognizing when certain thoughts that we're thinking are bringing us feelings of joy or hope or bliss, and we're recognizing when other thoughts are giving us feelings of despair or grief or sadness, just to name a few. And we learn that there's this practice of discernment, and it's this beautiful gift that we have in the thinking self to be able to start to make choices, to choose the thoughts that are leading us towards more satisfying thoughts, and choosing not to think thoughts that are more unsatisfying or dissatisfying. And this isn't just the thoughts that we're thinking, this is now the interactions that we're having, and the beliefs that we have about ourselves. And we are now stepping in to the really hard work. This is where we're starting to blast off in our rocket ship and doing that hard work of uncovering all of those aspects of our ego. In Jungian psychology, they talk about this as doing shadow work. So we're uncovering all of those hidden aspects of ourselves that may be functioning on a subconscious level and impacting our reality and impacting our lives, but that we, coming out of the bodily self, had no awareness of whatsoever. And this can be really difficult to do because we're having to confront parts of ourselves that we didn't know existed. Other people may have been aware of it, but we ourselves didn't know. And so we're trying to do the healing work and release the trauma and just dig deep and do that inner reflection and bring that awareness inwards in order to peel back all those layers of ego and now find those places within us that are really satisfying and really fulfilling and joyful, and turning that awareness into ourselves to be able to make the choices and practice the discernment that leads to the best outcome. So in the thinking self, I have come up with 3 categories of modalities. So the modalities are the tools that we have to do all of this work. And there truly are an infinite amount of modalities available to us at any given time to be able to step in and do this work. But what I realized is that all of it, everything is energy. And I speak about this in our first session together in September, in terms of my own personal awakening experience. There were 3 things that had to happen for my awakening to really begin. The first being, I had to believe that everything was energy. The second being, I had to take responsibility for my actions, or responsibility for my life. And then the third was I had to lose somebody that I deeply cared for in order for me to start to question, what else might be out there? Who am I? All of those sort of deeper questions of like, what happens when we die? And this concept of everything being energy really is fundamental in terms of the spiritual experience, because essentially we're just vibrational beings, and these vibrations really correspond to the emotions that we're feeling, and satisfaction or fulfillment is in itself a vibration. And so it's something that when we can tune into it or attune to it, then we can recognize it internally. And again, it helps us with that discernment process. So the three classifications of energy modalities that I have discovered is energy awareness, energy movement, and energy clearing. So energy awareness is essentially the tools and the modalities that we have to help us to identify our ego, the things that help us identify that shadow aspect of ourselves and illuminate those parts of our identity that we are unable to see. So, some examples of this might be journaling, or one of my favorites is reflection. That idea that when we're having a conversation with someone, they could be talking about something, and really it's just a reflection of our internal vibration. That often pops up in social media, the things that we're seeing on social media or reading in books, or things that are repeating in our lives. These are all just reflections of the energy that is being shown back to us, in order for us to be able to bring our awareness to it, to recognize that that's a vibration that's active within us at any given time. One of the most common modalities, I think, that we are all familiar with would be meditation. And by meditating, we're ideally bringing our awareness to our thoughts. And when we have that intimate connection with the thoughts, and hopefully the sort of the space between the thoughts as they come, we're bringing, again, awareness, energy awareness, to beliefs that might be limiting, or things that are holding us back. Dream analysis would be another one. Fasting is a really interesting one in terms of a modality for energy awareness. By choosing to restrict our interaction with something for a certain amount of time, helps us identify when we're being controlled by something. And then we can, again, use our discernment and decide how we're going to reintroduce that back into our life, whether it be social media or coffee or alcohol or some type of food. We're really bringing our awareness to how all of these influences are impacting us. Somatics is another one. We can use hypnosis and past life regression to bring our awareness to things ancestrally that might be influencing us in the now and influencing our reality. Numerology and astrology. If that's something that you practice or believe in, you may see repeating numbers that are trying to give you a sign. And with astrology, we're learning more about certain things and how they impact us as individuals, depending on our astrological sign. And there's so much depth to all this. You can go into so much detail in terms of how we're being influenced by everything that's going on in the universe in that regard. Cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy. These are all various modalities that help us learn more about ourselves. And when we're just beginning this journey, we may be just delving into personal growth a little bit and not getting into the sort of spiritual aspects of it. And we may just be doing personality quizzes and other personality tests just to help us learn things about ourselves that help us make sense of who we are a little bit, why we make the choices that we make, why we have the trauma that we have, and so on, right? There's so much to uncover. And often, it can be really scary to learn these things, and can cause us a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? It causes us a lot of discomfort. So then we move into, the second category of energy movement. And now that we've sort of shed this light on this aspect of ourselves, or this trauma that we have, or this ego part of ourselves, we're using modalities again to try and move this energy through our bodies. Like, we have, the chakra systems, and maybe, maybe your throat chakra is blocked, and we need to move that energy through to be able to release that, and become more authentically able to speak about something that, we're passionate about, or so on and so forth. And so many of these energy movement modalities are often really rooted in ancient traditions. They go back hundreds and thousands of years. And for example, drumming, Tai Chi, Feng Shui, yoga is another one that's really ancient, and has to do with all three of the energy categories. Shaking is another one, and then there's, of course, like art. Dancing is a movement of modality. Singing and chanting. Acupuncture obviously is an energy movement modality. Aromatherapy, massage. And then, in addition to sort of these ancient, really well practiced modalities, there are new modalities that are emerging all the time, and that people are downloading and learning and teaching and sharing, to help us work through these experiences, and to move them through us, and shift them into something that is no longer like holding us back or causing us discomfort. It can include things like biofield tuning or sound baths. Cold water immersion is obviously really popular right now. Another one, EMDR and gratitude practices, just to name a few of these energy movement modalities. Then the last one is energy clearing. And often the energy clearing modalities are associated with cycles. So maybe it's moon cycles, or nature cycles, or seasons, menstrual cycles. So we may be experiencing a full moon, and we set the intention to release certain energies or limiting beliefs that we have. Or in a new moon cycle, we may set an intention to practice, a new belief, or a new habit, or something along that line. Burning is an energy clearing technique. If you've been journaling something, or you've done some sort of artwork that has brought this awareness, this energy awareness to you, and you've moved it in a certain way, and now you're ready to clear it, you burn it, and release it back to the universe. Smudging is another ancient energy clearing practice. Reiki, Kundalini yoga, breath work, Ayurveda, tapping or emotional freedom technique, trauma release exercises, and inner child work. These are all energy clearing modalities. And there's a few things that I want to say about all of them, is in that some modalities are going to fall into all three of these categories, like yoga, meditation, gene keys. Those are all, encompassing all three of these. Some of them are more specific to certain categories, and it's possible that with certain energies, we don't even necessarily have to be aware of them in order to move them and clear them through us. Lastly, some of us may just pick one modality like meditation that works really well for us and just stick with that and do all of the work that we need to do with one modality. Whereas other people like myself, may try all of the modalities and learn a little bit about themselves with each one, and do a little bit of work with one modality and then move to another modality to support that work, and then try a different modality to be able to learn something else about themselves, and then clear it using something else, and just combine all of these modalities into one sort of beautiful practice that is still doing all of that hard work that we're doing in the thinking self, in order to identify the aspects of ourselves that no longer resonate with the authentic person that we are becoming. One of the examples, just to kind of solidify it a little bit more for you, is this idea for me of codependent relationships, and this is something that has been part of my life for really like long time, but I was so identified with it and so unaware that these were something that was affecting my relationships, that I couldn't see it for a really long time. And it took multiple different modalities of energy awareness to even bring it to my attention before I could acknowledge that it was something that I needed to start moving through and clearing as part of my own identity and part of my ego. So with the codependency, there was a lot of reflection at first, in terms of like me accusing or seeing codependent relationships in other people, and questioning it, and then doing some like research on it, and then realizing like, okay, this is what it looks like to be in a codependent relationship. Yeah, that's definitely happening for them. But then realizing, okay, this is a reflection piece. Actually, maybe this is something I need to look at for myself. And then having other people come to me with like book recommendations and whatnot, and saying, you should consider looking at this codependency book. And then as I sort of started to like open my awareness to that and allow it to sink in, it was, a painful realization that, yes, okay, this is something that is part of my life, part of my existence. And now I need to figure out how to move forward with that. And, how am I going to do that, with talk therapy, with yoga, with meditation, with journaling, and so on and so forth, until I'm able to release that part of my identity and clear it, and essentially transmute that energy that is a codependent experience into something that now serves me. And maybe that looks like setting boundaries and creating spaces and having conversations around it that are healthy rather than unhealthy, right? To be determined. So that is the energy categories, the energy modality categories that are all the ways of doing the work in the thinking self. So the rocket ship, the really hard work that we put in, and sometimes we don't want to do because it's so freaking hard and scary. So when we take a step back from all of that work, we can arrive into the observer self. So going back to the observer self in relation to our theme for the evening of satisfaction, we have found this ability to step back and now become the witness to all of that external and internal work that's going on in the other soul selves. And there is this ease and acceptance that permeates in this observer self. Just like in the rocket ship, when we reached orbit, or we're now shooting off into space towards the moon, there aren't all these forces pulling and pushing on us. Instead, there's this calm, quiet presence that emerges, and we realize that all of that satisfaction that we're seeking, that fulfillment that we're looking for, is within us. And now over here is this cycle of fulfillment that we, can carry on, and we can choose to interact with it, but we know we are not dependent on it anymore for any sense of satisfaction. We have the clarity now to be able to know that that satisfaction is coming from within us and is available to us at any given time. We just have to make the choice to attune to it first before we go out and interact with the external world. And when we find ourselves reaching for that external satisfaction, we can take a pause and bring ourselves back into that moment, back into that internal place, and just be with that internal fulfillment first. And I'm going to talk about this idea of presence and the observer self in more detail in our fourth session and our last session next month in December. And hopefully, I really, it's sort of my intention that between this session and then this last session, that if you haven't already stepped into this observer self, that you're going to have this experience, and be able to recognize it within yourself when you land there, because it's not something, as I've said before, that we can talk ourselves into. It's sort of more something that just finds us. But it is such a shift in perspective that once you recognize that you're there, you can get your way back to it a little bit easier and a little bit easier next time and every time that you remember that it is a place that you can go to and arrive to, and tune into that internal satisfaction whenever you remember that it's available to you, because it's always available to you within you at any given time. So lastly, then we have the transcendent self. And this is where we are fully consciousness. We are connected with our soul. We have released or transmuted or embraced all of those aspects of our ego, and are essentially stepping out of the duality and into this place of oneness and connection. And as I stated before, this is now something that you have to experience in order to understand it. It's not something that I can necessarily describe with words, because the words that I'm using are from my mind, and the transcendent self is beyond the mind. And it's a beautiful place. I mean, when you arrive in the transcendent self, are experiencing just true fulfillment, a level of satisfaction that is blissful, truly blissful. And as I've said before, bliss is our birthright. So we're essentially returning to who we are meant to be, who and like the essence of our being is the transcendent self. And we should be able, or we have the ability to be able to connect with this aspect, this whole part of ourselves at any time. We've simply just been covering it with all of these layers of ego up until this point. And we are able to connect with this transcendent part of ourselves, maybe just for, a glimpse, or we may find a prolonged time of transcendence, but simply by knowing that it's there, and by practicing and connecting with possibly others who are holding that space, we can raise our level of personal satisfaction. We're raising that vibration within us to be able to meet them there, and practice holding that space more and more of the time. So next month, the last of the soul sessions is focusing on this idea of presence and time, present and future, past. December 4th, Monday, December 4th is the first Monday in December. And I hope and look forward to sharing what emerges from that conversation. Yeah, like I said, I am setting the intention that if you haven't already experienced the observer self, that this is a place that is going to arrive in your experience. And I'm not going to make any promises of the transcendent self, but I think we got there last month on some level. I don't know if you experienced it with me or not, but just by being present and holding this space together, and bringing our awareness to that space, we are really just aligning our energies with that possibility at any given time. So I'm going to leave you with that tonight. Thank you again for coming out and joining me and listening to this. And let me know if you watch the replay and if it sparks anything for you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And enjoy the rest of your evening. And I look forward to meeting with you again in December. Okay.